What? You're not worried about your place after the robot uprising? Okay. Technology is something we tend to take for granted, mostly because it's such a part of our life it's hard to think of ourselves not having it. Unless you're like my daughter, who, when she doesn't have her phone, starts to go in withdrawal shakes and starts to hit me. Anyway, it's important for us because we're in fields where technology is going to be a major factor to keep up on it because technology changes an awful lot. If you haven't done the quiz already, do the quiz now, and let's talk about it. It's important to be aware of the trends of technology because technology has a certain feature. It changes very fastly, and that can completely alter the way you do business. I have a friend of mine whose first job out of college was working for an insurance company, and he was interviewing everybody and using those interviews to write people's job descriptions because the technology had changed so much since they were last done that no one's job description fit what they actually do. I think that one of the first steps in really being aware of how transient trends are in technology, hey, transient trends technology, alliteration, yay! Anyway, is being aware of the history of technology and realizing just how quickly things change and how massively things change. That's why I had you do that brief online quiz. Don't worry, I'm going to grade it as you did it or didn't do it. So there's not necessarily right or wrong answers here. Well, there is right answers, but not. But you don't have to think about that in terms of your quiz answers. Let's go through them. The first question was, when was the first iPhone released? It was released in 2007. Incidentally, we'll get back to this later. It was not the first smartphone. Not by well over a decade, but we'll get there. The question two, when was the Android OS released? Well, the Android OS was first released in 2008. So if you hear people talking about the difference between Apple and Android operating systems, they're not all that far off, at least in terms of their history. Question three, when was the first commercially released CD? Well, when was it released? It was released in 1982. Now, you'd expect that the first CD would be something monumental, or at least it would be classical music or something like that. No, it was a Billy Joel album. Now, this one might hit you a bit by surprise. The first public release of the MP3 format was in 1993. This is one, sheesh, when did I don't recall ever hearing about MP3s until 99, 2000. And there's a very good reason for that, as MP3s were pretty much useless until we got the high-speed internet technology, or at least higher than you could ever get in dial-up. Trust me, I've downloaded stuff in the dial-up era. You'd set it to download 3 songs before you went to bed, and if you were lucky, 1 or 2 of them would have made it. The first commercial Blu-ray player was released in 2003. Now, I asked you about this one because Blu-ray was really only one of 2 competing ideas. Blu-ray was supported by a number of manufacturers, and another group of manufacturers supported something called HD DVD. Why did Blu-ray win out? It's kind of a hard question to answer. It's not necessarily that it was the best, because I'm from all I've heard, they were two pretty much evenly matched ones. It's just a bunch of weird market forces at work. This is important to know because when a new technology comes, it might not always be universal. Now, we talked about the first MP3. When did iTunes come around? iTunes launched in 2001. The interesting thing about this is that was a grand total of 6 years before the first iPhone was released. Now for a long time, we used to think of iTunes as being the ubiquitous iPhone app. Didn't they discontinue it recently? When was Amazon launched? July 5th, 1994. The fact that Amazon predates the iPhone, predates Facebook, and by a decent distance is one that's kind of hard to grasp, particularly because the richest person in the world is the Amazon CEO. You know who the richest female in the world is? His ex-wife. They started out just as a bookseller. They now pretty much sell everything you can humanly imagine. Facebook, we mentioned it earlier. When did Facebook launch? Well, actually, it was the Facebook, and it launched in 2004. For the first however many number of years to get on Facebook, it would only accept domains from certain colleges. I got on when it was a college-only thing. It started out at Harvard, because if you've seen the movie The Social Network, which is a really great movie, by the way, you'll know that that's where Mark Zuckerberg went. And it was originally used for dating and to talk about how hot people were. Luckily, we take it seriously now. Most people around the age of the average freshman tell me that they prefer to use Snapchat. Well, Snapchat has only been around 9 years. So it's a much more recent technology than you'd expect. Do you know when Twitter launched? Twitter launched in 2006, and this is actually the first tweet. It's been retweeted quite a bit since then, but it was posted on the 21st of March 2006. Now, these are the things you use every day, or at least things that you have a good familiarity with. And most people have no clue as to when any of those came out. Let's take a bit longer of a look at computer history. The first microprocessing digital computer was ENIAC, 1946. However, it's important to know that computers predated microprocessor power. Alan Turing built computing devices much earlier. The first Turing machine was built in 1936. Alan Turing did very valuable work for the World War II Allied side, helping to break Nazi secret codes. As a thanks, he was outed as a gay man and chemically castrated, fell into depression, and killed himself. We love our pioneers. Now, as far as stuff being commercially available, because these were all obviously big government things, the first personal computer is the Kenbeck one. 1971. It was a kit, as most of the early PCs were. They didn't sell many of them, you see, only 40 of them. Don't ask me how it works, I have no idea. The first non-kit commercial PC was the Altair 8800. Again, don't ask me how it works, but at least you see it has some kind of drive mechanism, so it makes a little bit more sense than the other one. The first Apple computer, IBM had some out on the market before, but Apple one came out in 1976. It was notable because it had a graphic interface. However, it didn't originate the idea of a graphic interface. That came from the Xerox Alto. It wasn't a commercial project. That was in 1973. Microsoft, Bill Gates, and Steve Jobs and Wozniak all stole their graphic ideas from Xerox. You want to see the first laptop? This is pretty hilarious. This is the Osborne 1 from 1981. Don't think you'd be playing a lot of video games on that. The first cell phone commercially available was 1973. The Motorola Dynatec. Incidentally, AT&T actually had cell technology they could have used somewhere in the 50s, but they didn't want to put out something that would just cannibalize their own business. I guess you can understand. The next notable milestone in technology was the Simon. It wasn't called a smartphone because the term smartphone didn't come until about a year later, but it was the first digital assistant slash telephone-ish thing. The actual first thing to be called a smartphone was the AT&T communicator. And this was in 1995. Compare that to what you're carrying around now. And you can see how far technology has changed. If you want to see how far it's going to change and how quickly, think about how quickly we move from one thing to the other. And then look to see what's coming up. Google patented in 2016 smart lenses you inject into your eyes to get the internet directly beamed into your head. That's 4 years ago, people. Now, obviously, they're still making it workable, but it's not that far along. And the next step after a contact is directly controlling stuff with your mind. And they're working on that too. You can expect that. Having some awareness of the historical length of all this is important because you get an idea of how fast stuff is going to come up, how drastically things are going to change. I don't think you can really predict where we're going to go in 5 to 10 years. Heck, we still don't really know what the internet's for. For a while, the internet was all about blogs. For a while before that, it was all about home web pages. A little while ago, it was all about social networks. Now, who knows? But the main lesson here is that you can't ignore this stuff. Because you all will be involved in technology-oriented fields, the tech is going to change very quickly, and you're going to have to keep learning it. Working with technology means you're a lifetime learner. One thing that's really hard for us to fathom is that compared to everything else, our computers are a new technology. The internet is a new technology. Phones are a new technology. What your phone is right now is not what your phone was 10 years ago, and it's not going to be what your phone is 20 years from now. Things are going to constantly change. You got to keep up. See you next time.